Hi, all, and thanks again for joining us at the 2023 Sloan Sports Analytics Conference Competitive Advantage Talks presented by Kager. My name is Anna Yee, and I'm a first-year MBA student at MIT Sloan. It's my pleasure to introduce the presentation, Esports Analytics for League of Legends. Please join me in welcoming Philip Myman, Analytics Professor and MSBA Program Director at Fairfield Dolan, to the stage.
Thank you, Anna. Thanks so much. How many people here play League of Legends? All right. How about other esports? CSGO, Overwatch, Fortnite, anything like that? How about other just video games? All right, all right. Have you ever played a video game so much that it's affected your personal relationships? Yes, yes, me too. I remember, you love your family, you love your friends, you love your job, but if they're ever out of the house and you have a free couple of hours and you could just game, oh, right? What a special treat that is. One of the things, so this is League of Legends. One of the things that esports didn't have until recently, that traditional sports had, was a way for dads to teach their sons or moms to teach their daughters, play catch with them, show them how to dribble and cross over and do all this kinds of stuff. There was no generational transfer of knowledge, right? It was a brand new thing. But now League of Legends is about 14 years old. And I started playing it with my son. So it's so special, sharing such a complicated game with a little 8-year-old. One of the proudest days of my life happened 2 days ago. He came to my class, 60 sports analytics undergraduate students, Fairfield University, and he comes to the front of the room. And he had come a couple of times to watch the class. The first time, he didn't even want to walk in the room. He was so shy. But this time, I asked him to give a talk. Tell us about what League of Legends is. And he just went to the front of the class, he sat down, he got out his iPad, he's sharing his screens, like, here's what a custom game looks like. There's 3 lanes, there's 150-something champions, there's all these choices you can make. One of the things that was most important to him was medals, that you can get accomplishments and all this stuff. And at the end, afterwards, he comes to me and he says, Papa, why are your students so quiet? Because he's used to second grade, where people just shout out and interrupt everybody. It was awesome. So there is a way for everybody to play this game. There's an important consideration here for competitive advantage talks. This is Eugene, my co-author. We've done a lot of research paper talks before, and I love the research paper tracks. And if you look at the research papers this year, they're so incredible and technical and advanced. What is the relationship between research paper talks and competitive advantage? I used to love both. In fact, a lot of this work was presented at a research paper conference, but the competitive advantage is about something grander. It's about something that unifies us all. And there's a bit of a puzzle here. Why would you share a competitive advantage if you have it? And you've attended some of these other competitive advantage talks. They're incredible. So we'll see. One of the competitive advantages that's coming out here is this is an advantage for you. So this is a lesson in failure. We built something incredible, which I'll share with you. It's all open source and available, and you can have it. It's a gift. Enjoy it. Build on it if you like. But maybe you can help me spot where we went wrong. Why didn't this work? One of the saddest days I remember was when we had to shut it down. As a business, it just didn't work, and I'm still not exactly sure why. Let me tell you what we've done, and you can tell me where we went wrong. So you'd think in a game like esports, in a video game, it's all on a computer. It should have an incredible advantage in terms of data, right? You don't have to collect cameras and do all this stuff. It's right there. It's zeros and ones. Why not get it? But it's not quite that way. So the publishers of these video games don't necessarily release all of the information. They release some of the information, like at the top. Like you can see in this particular snapshot of one game, the blue team has, I think, 22 kills. The red team has 18. That's a stat. That's like points. Fine. We have some information here about the different champions and what's currently on cooldown and what items they've purchased. Because here's what happens with a game like League of Legends. You start every game fresh. You don't have any competitive advantage from previous experience. You don't like buy a sword in a previous game, you can carry it over. No, everybody starts blank. You have to build up your experience over the game by killing minions and last-shotting them, and you buy items with your goal to make your character stronger, and then you win the game. So watching what all these items are, how many kills each particular champion has, how many times they died, how many times they assisted, all of these things are important, but this is kind of like a box score. Right? That's kind of a box score. There's a lot of other information that is not shared, that is very hard to find, like the current cooldowns of all your summoner spells. Summoner spells are like additional strong abilities that you can use, but they have a several minute cooldown. You can't really use them all the time, like Flash. for a particular champion, seeing what abilities they currently have and available and are up and are on cooldowns versus not. The location of the champions, this is not instantly available. One of the things we had to do with extracting information, how do you get this information? So we had to spin up lots of Amazon AWS servlets and so on, and look at these images, play the game on the replay, watch each particular snapshot, look for that white rectangle. You see the white rectangle? Once you see the white rectangle, then you know from that champion's perspective, they're at the center of that white rectangle, so then you can get the XY coordinates. What about the location within a team fight? So it's a 5-on-5 game with 3 lanes. You're matched up with 4 randos, and you're playing against 5 other randos. Unless you're pro, then you have teams, but on an amateur basis. So in this situation, it looks like, what do we have? 3 blue teams and 2 more red teammates there. Who's going to win this team fight? It's not exactly clear, but it looks like probably red is going to win because the blues are about to die and then they'll take over. Being able to distinguish in a particular team fight where people stood and the appropriate way of fighting would be a very useful competitive advantage for anybody to have, right? For a coach, for a player, for anybody. But we don't have that information, so we have to extract it. The health of the turrets, the location of the fog of wars, what you can see, what you can't see. When you get to higher levels, not at my level, I'm not a very good player, even though I've played years and years and years, right? And avoided responsibilities and woke up early so nobody would bother me. I still suck. I'm barely at median level in terms of rank for everybody, probably below. But as you get higher and higher levels, the game becomes less about killing and that kind of stuff, more about vision, knowing where the enemy is. So having the fog of war is very important. And there's all sorts of macro things like the turrets, and you can see, this is actually from one of my games, you can see the little annoying guy up here. His name is Teemo. If you play League of Legends, you know Teemo. I'd one trick Tryndamere. Tryndamere is my favorite champion, but once in a while I play Teemo. Why? Because I did some very advanced analytics, and it turns out in any game, after a chat, some of the chat can be toxic, right? Because people get annoying. But whenever you look at the phrase, you see the phrase, the phrase that autocorrects to duck, or screw blank, right? Screw blank. The blank is 90% of the time Teemo. And that's whether it's the opponents saying screw Teemo or your own team saying screw Teemo. He's annoying. Everybody hates him. So you got to play him. So what's nice about playing is one of the things he can do, and other champions can do this too, and Tryndamere especially, it's called split push. There's micro movements where you're playing against a 1-on-1 or 2-on-2 and you're trying to avoid their abilities and shoot them. And there's macro decisions like, look, all those guys are fighting over there. What should you do? Should you come join them or should you go separately like Teemo did here, way up top, and try to get an objective like a turret, push down turret so you can get to the end of the nexus. So all of those, there's an incredibly vast, rich amount of questions you can ask about it. But this is all the data that's typically available, right? We have data like how many minutes played, when were you alive or dead, what's happening with the turrets, and so on. But we want to do more. Now, what we did, and what correct me anytime you think we did something wrong, but I think the right approach in general is, okay, we want more data. Not all data is important. Some data you want to get information out of it and knowledge out of it, not just raw data. But in principle, you want to get more data. So this is all of the additional amount of data that we were able to extract from spinning up all these servers. The item status is the ward cooldowns, all the pings, the various stats of every particular champion, how much damage you dealt and to who, and how much you received or mitigated or shielded. And most importantly, of course, is the X and Y location and things like velocity and acceleration, whether you're stealthed, all those sorts of seemingly important data. What's important? Well, once you have the data, it's kind of like going from the optical data in basketball, right? Knowing where LeBron James is standing down to a quarter of an inch on one particular tape, that particular piece of data is not very useful. But looking for patterns from it, evolving it to see information and knowledge from it, that's what we have here. So if we take those raw stats, try to connect them to more broader stats, like within a team fight, was it balanced in terms of numbers, or who had the advantage in terms of health or items? And if you can look, one of the biggest insights we found was between regular kills and smart kills, or regular deaths and worthless deaths. So we'll talk about that and what makes them worth or worthless. Once you have things like position data, you can have all sorts of beautiful analytics, like a heat map. You can see this heat map, you can see the entire game in a snapshot. Clearly this person's heat map, they were playing the mid lane. They helped out a little bit on bot, they helped out on Baron, they pushed through. There was a big team fight and lots of energy spent on that second turret. Eventually they pushed through, drove it down and won the nexus. Great. You can see the ward map, where were wards placed, and more generally you can see over the vision over time for your team versus the other team, and the yellow line is the net vision. You won the vision war. You started seeing more of the map than the enemies did, so they can't hide. There's nowhere for them to go. You can do, for an individual, you can start to see how you can do better. Where are you spending time or wasting time? I tend to waste a lot of time dead. That's not a good thing, if that's not obvious immediately. So you can split it up. The league and many esports, they don't have certain quarters like physical sports tend to do. They have kind of game states. So the first game state changes when a turret falls. That would be the end of early game. Then you have a mid game, then you have a late game. So you can split those kinds of things up. You can even get into deep psychological insights like tilt management. What's tilt? You know tilt from poker. Tilt in games. Anyone ever tilted in a video game? My man. We're together. We should play sometime. We'll tilt each other. It'll be great. Tilt is when you're playing, you think, okay, and then someone kills you. And you're like, God darn it. Darn it, gosh. And then you go out again, they kill you again. And then you just lose your mind. You're like, okay, I'll get them this time. Now that I'm 3 levels behind and they have 4,000 more gold, now I can really kill them. And you just start dying and dying and dying. And there's something happens in your brain. Something switches off. Like you're no longer a rational gamer. You're just like a punk, right? You're just like, you're running it down mid. You've lost your mind. So one way to measure, how do you measure that, right? One way to measure it is look at the proportion of time over the previous few minutes of all the time that anyone on your team spent dead. What portion was your contribution? If you're contributing 100% of that, you're the only one dead for many minutes at a time, you're tilted, right? Does that sound reasonable? But if you're not, if it's like 20%, then that's fine. Like your team got wiped out, that's fine. It's not a big deal. So there are important insights there. We want to, of course, have a win probability model. That's a natural thing to do. So we built this little app where you put in how many minutes have gone by, how many turrets you've taken, how many kills each person has had, who has more dragons, barons. Given all that, it'll tell you what's the probability of winning this particular game. So you can, like me, decide if you should surrender early or not, right? That's one of the possibilities. But given that important win probability, that's fine as an app. But here's the essential insight of what we found, which transcends just League and goes to other sports, is how do you, in general, in a team sport, how do you know what you can do as a player to help your team? So think about basketball. Sure, you need to score points. Everyone needs to score points. And if you look at a graph of, let's say, points scored by an individual versus their team's winning, you'll get something that looks like this. Now, this is League. This is your kills. Clearly, if you're killing the opponents, it's like getting points. It's good, right? It's good for them to die. But the more you kill them, probably you're going to win. So it's not a perfect line, but you know, if your performance in a game was something at the top, like the 199th percentile of everybody relative to your position and rank, then you're probably going to win at something like, 70%. And if you're one of the worst, you're probably going to win at something like 30%, something in that ballpark, right? That seems reasonable that there's some kind of natural relationship like that. But it's not a perfect relationship, and you would see something like this in terms of points, too. If you score 50 points, you're probably going to win, but sometimes you score 40 and you lose in the last second full court shot that comes in 0.1 seconds after the buzzer. It happens, like to Joel Embiid. So it's not a perfect category, but here's what we found with the win probabilities. If you look at standard kills, so standard kills, I killed an opponent, fine. But one of the number 1 rules in League is never chase Singed. Who's Singed? Singed is this champion who has, I don't know if he's an alien, but he has a backpack with poison on him. So if you chase him, he has a lot of speed, move up, so it's hard to catch him. Plus he's poisoning you the whole time, so you're running, man, I'm going to get this guy, and then you probably die. You might not die. Maybe you have your whole team come and gank him from the other side, but why not chase Singed? Because it'll take you a minute and a half to kill him. And if you're spending a minute and a half of your entire team trying to kill this one guy, who cares? He's dead. The other 4 players on his team have taken your turret, taken a baron. They're at home. They're driving home. They won already. It's over. That's a dumb kill. Who cares that you killed Singed if you lost the game, right? So if we could use that win probability model to see after you killed somebody versus before, given all of the changes in state that can happen, what is the probability of your winning? Has it increased? After you kill a Singed like this, it probably has not. It's probably a waste of time, especially if you had multiple resources committed to it. Does that make sense? So watch what happens with this graph. This is the most amazing graph I've ever seen. If you change it from standard kills to smart kills, that lines up virtually I've never seen a graph like this. And you could apply this, you could do the same thing with basketball, with hockey, with baseball, anything else. If you could change the standard stats to filter for those stats which improve the local win probability, you'll get something like this, I believe. We haven't tried it, but I think that would be amazing. And the same thing happens with deaths. So you could just die. I die all the time, and I get nothing for it. That's a worthless death. But if you die, and in the meantime, like if you're the singed, if your team is getting something somewhere else, or you take a turret, or you take an inhibitor, and then you die, that's worth it, because you got something for the team, you got an objective. But by itself, it's the same sort of graph. It's not great. But if you look in terms of worthless deaths, this is reversed, obviously, because you don't want worthless deaths. But if you're getting very few worthless deaths, you're very, very likely to win. How do we summarize everything? Summarize everything we found. There's one tool that is very underused. It's called fast and frugal trees. It's sort of it's not quite pure statistics. It's not quite machine learning or AI or ChatGPT, but it's something amazing. And the more you can use it for your own kind of things, it's pretty remarkable. One of the early use cases for it and its inspiration was in cancer. So if you can detect a tumor, you don't want to have like 20 different branching decision tree questions, because the doctor's going to get confused. Measure this, measure that. It's confusing. A fast tree is one that's very small. It's frugal in that in every decision point, you're either coming to a decision and a prediction, or you ask another question that's also branching into two. And what we find for League, given all of these stats that we've calculated, all this amazing stuff, that turns down to just 3 things. First question. Your game, did you have a lot of worthless deaths? Which I usually do. If you have a lot of worthless deaths, more than average, you're probably going to lose. That's the prediction. Okay. If you didn't die too much worthlessly, did you at least get some smart kills, more than average? If you got more than average smart kills, then you're probably going to win. Absent either of those, you're not getting a lot of worthless deaths and you're not getting a lot of smart kills. You're sort of kind of floating, doing nothing. The last question is, did you have a good map coverage? Did you help your team? Did you go around a lot, or were you just kind of standing in your lane doing nothing? If you walk around a lot, then you're probably going to win. If you didn't help out, then you're probably going to lose. That's a ridiculously simple tree, a decision tree, right? Given that it still provides 80% accuracy. It predicts whether you're going to win 80% of the time, just those 3 simple questions. Now, how useful is that for you as a player to know what you need to do? Number 1, focus on worthless kills. Don't die for no reason. Number 2, if you're going to get a kill, make sure it's smart. Number 3, if you can't do either of those, at least help your team. Sounds reasonable, right? And here's the bottom line. And then I want to give you some reflections. So the bottom line is what we did. We used a combination of computer vision, dynamic client hooks, machine learning, visualization, logistic regression, large-scale cloud computing, and fast and frugal trees to analyze millions of League of Legends games from the pro level all the way down with categorized by opportunities and abilities. We created definitions of stats and their combinations of stats that gave information to present a framework for individual performance and contribution to a team's win that we showed does in fact change and make a difference. That a single individual, if you look at their stats and correct them for win probability, does contribute to the team wins virtually perfectly linearly. All the code is open sourced. We've had lots of people download it and start looking at it. It's about 1 million lines of code, primarily in Go, Python, some Mathematica. And this is, so that what's the advantage here? You can take it, it's yours, it's open, go get it. Spin up all the AWSs you want, spend the money you want. Why didn't it work for us? We thought, originally we had started Advantage Sports with basketball, and we created amazing stats using 50 full-time employees, tracking every single game, looking at tracking things like is the hand up on defense, all sorts of stuff. But the problem there was there's only 30 potential clients, and they weren't ready to pay as much as we needed to keep that going. And maybe now it's going to be much cheaper. You don't need all those people. So we pivoted to what we thought would be a better sport, esports. From esports, we pivoted to thinking that we don't have to sell teams. We had partners with virtually every professional team. We thought individuals would pay. What we found is individuals don't pay. They don't care about stats, right? In fact, what's amazing about League of Legends is there's millions of players. Virtually, like 98% of them never pay a penny. So how's Riot making tons of money? It's the 2% who are spending a little bit of money. They buy it skins. What's a skin? A skin is just to make Tryndamere or Teemo look a little bit different. It doesn't change the gameplay at all. It doesn't give you any competitive advantage. Let's pause and reflect a little bit on where are we going with competitive advantage? What could be happening now? One thing that hopefully the future will bear in mind is using generative AI to make new things. Like what if you could make your own skill? Like here's a skin, like here's a sushi master Tryndamere. Like this is a guy who loves swords. Or if you make Teemo look like a businessman. But then you can also do things like ask ChatGPT how to win in a particular situation. Now this is a pretty good answer. It's a better answer than you can get from most people asking live, right? And imagine if you feed in additional information like these stats as part of the prompt and ask it a question, what should you do in this situation? The same thing, you can ask the opposite and it gives you the opposite situation. Now, what makes this a competitive advantage? And why are competitive advantage talks so important? I don't think it's because, I went to a conference many years ago in a different field, in finance, conventional finance. And there's a difference in culture there between conventional finance and behavioral finance. The conventional finance, it's almost like if you're not 100% right, then you're wrong. It's very advanced. And like you reach peak something in a field and it becomes not welcoming of outsiders. It's bunkering down, right? But when you go to a behavioral finance conference, everyone's welcoming, and the presumption there is if you're not wrong, then you're at least partially right. You're onto some sort of truth. And what I admire most about the Sports Analytics Conference at Sloan is that same sense of inclusivity and openness, where competitive advantages are shared, right? We're all here to work together. It's not that we have a competitive advantage, we're trying to beat every one of you. We play the game not to win, but to participate, to say GG afterwards, to shake hands, because we're part of this amazing community. It's not that what really matters is the competition is our advantage. The fact that we can play at the best levels and share with each other, I think that's amazing. There's been a lot of analytics in sports, and that's wonderful, but maybe it's now time to also think about putting the sports into sports analytics, the camaraderie, the teamwork, the working together. So I'm grateful to be part of this community with you, and I hope we continue to grow with thousands and thousands more members. Thank you. Questions? Yes, my man. What's your rank?
What's up?
What's your rank?
The only thing I'll say about that is that jungle diff every game, bot dies 2v2, always counter pick cheese top.
Nice.
Anyway, thank you so much for this. I think that this is super cool in a relatively unexplored area. I feel like one bit of nuance that I was always curious about when it came to kind of evaluating performances in the champions themselves, kind of being in the basketball space, one thing that I think about is like, there's only one ball in basketball, only one thing that you can kind of pilot into the hoop. But in League of Legends, there's 160 different champions and they all have distinct flavors, right? Like some are hard scalers, some are more early agency, and how you kind of view the game depends on what flavor of champion you're playing. If you're playing a Caston, lane's going to be very different than if you're like a LeBlanc. When you need to have early agency, you have to have that early impact. Have you been able to do anything that kind of measures the different flavors and the nuance of the champions themselves?
There's too many champions to look at from that way, from what we've seen. What we looked at more was chemistry combinations, what characters, what types of champions work together. And we found that, you know, it's funny, you end up doing a lot of sports analytics work in almost any field, and then it ends up with, oh, the coaches had it right. Right? So there are certain team comps and metas that work well together given the particular rules. We have not looked at any particular specific champion to see like which one would be dominant, but wouldn't it be cool to just run an AI to play games lots of times so it can find weird things, like maybe an unusual Tryndamere build that just dominates no matter what, right? Yeah.
Hi, hard stuck silver 3.
Oh, me
Top
too.
lane.
Me too.
I mean, what advice do you have for me?
Don't die worthlessly.
Awesome.
Who's your main?
Eloy and Garen.
Oh, Ilawi
Yeah,
and Garen. Okay, so you like tanky kind of.
yeah.
Yeah, try a different try a Teemo.
I Teemo some when those get banned.
What do you think?
I
a different style.
either dominate or my team cusses at me the whole time.
Yes, welcome to Teemo. That's right.
As a fellow bad player, another hard stuck silver, well, I mean, I probably have a very high share of worthless deaths, but how did you go about determining like what makes a death worthless or what makes a kill smart or valuable?
The win probability model that we had built in the earlier stage. So if you look at the state of the game afterwards versus the state of the game before, was the death itself, did it contribute to the probability of your team winning or not? Because at the same time, if you lost a turret, then it didn't.
Thank you.
Do one more question, then feel free to come speak to him up front.
I'm a Garen, and I only play Wild Rift, so my rank doesn't really matter because it's all low elo. But I wanted to ask if you had tried to incorporate more than just those 3 factors, and if so, what was the highest ability to predict a game result based on an individual player that you achieved?
I don't know about individual player. I have to think about that. But this, the way the Fast and Frugal trees it, we sent in 100 different parameters, everything. It automatically finds the things that are important. Thank you all very much.